Okay, our last speaker is Dr. Scott Delacroix, and he will be talking with you about a multidisciplinary approach to getting a protocol approved and enrolling patients efficiently. And then there will be a time for questions after his presentation.
Hello, everybody. Y'all are running on time because I see there's a lot of research nurses in here. If this was a bunch of physicians, y'all would be 20 minutes late. So I'm just going to give a pragmatic talk. Thank you all for inviting me to give this talk. I've got no relevant financial disclosures. What I'm going to tell you today may not be translatable to the other 49 states, because in Louisiana we do things a little bit differently. But I'm hearing stories about you all having sort of fractionated and dispersed sites, and that's sort of what we are. So in our team that we've developed, every time a clinical trial comes up, we talk about whiteboarding the trial. That's our term. And our whiteboarding really just means from start to finish, going over every potential blockade to getting the patient enrolled on trial, screened, enrolled, treated, and then in follow-up. But before you even do that, you have to have a baseline assessment for any clinical trial. And baseline assessment, just because a physician comes to you and says, look, I'd like to do clinical trials, and I see a lot of X cancer in my clinic. You really have to start with your hospital pathology, look at the index cases, look at the prevalence in the practice, and look at whether or not the trial fits the stage of cancer that is prominent in your practice or at the specific site. Once you've assessed that, so like at our institution, urology, we have a large urologic oncology practice, so we say, okay, well, we want to look for some good quality trials. And you all probably know this. This is not known when I speak to a group of physicians. Physicians don't know how to go find out about the trials. They look at their research nurse. Do you have anything in bladder? Do you have anything in prostate? But it's really very simple. Go to CTSU, and there's two ways to get to it. CTSU, I'm on it twice a week. I love this website. You can go here, and you can go to protocol list. I don't really like that as much, so you can click protocol list. It'll come up with every protocol, and you can sit and distribute it or sort it by cancer type. The way I like to do is actually log in, and thankfully this is one of those logins that it doesn't expire after 30 days. It's something like 100 days. So you log in and Google remembers it, and you go in, and then you click resources and then disease portfolios. Once you get disease portfolios, this is something that's new, I'll say new over the past year, that's really nice. So I can come in here, my area of interest is genitourinary cancers, and I can click the genitourinary cancer portfolio, and this is a nice one-pager, sometimes it's a two-pager, that goes through each and every trial in genitourinary cancer, prostate, kidney, bladder, and I can look at this and determine, okay, what space do I have? Do I have any competing trials in this space? And make sure that I'm at least have the NCTN trials open that are appropriate for my individual sites. There are other group-specific trials that aren't listed on this. So this does not list every trial that's on CTSU. Like we just opened a Wake Forest trial, 1802. That's not on here. So I think this is going to include every major treatment trial and then some of the other from the major research bases. So that's how we find the trials. Also, baseline assessment of your program, do you have good research nurses? Research nurses are good research nurses are motivated, organized, timely. Although physicians a lot of times are motivated, they're not very organized and not very timely, so our research nurses really keep us on track. But the glue that holds our program together is really our research nurses. Once you decide you're going to open a clinical trial, then you need to understand your specific institutional process. Not site-specific, not at this clinic or at this hospital, the overarching institutional process. And this is where you can really get ground to a halt. There's process variation that exists from one NCORP to another, one hospital system to another, and there are these historical or institutional fiefdoms that exist. You hear it, we can't do it that way because this is the way it's always been done. That can't be done. They love to throw patient safety at you. You have to fill out those 50 forms and do these 5 amendments because it's for patient safety. Like, that ends the conversation. And that's not right. You need to ask why. And you need to understand possible process improvements in activating and enrolling to CIRB-approved trials. So one of the nice things and one of the biggest fights we had at our institution was going from IRB of record at our site to CIRB, and we're just going to notify you, local IRB. And pre-2017, it was a dual parallel approval process. So even if it was a CRB study, you had to go through the local IRB, you had to report everything twice. It's a mess. Now we have a CRB only, and the way that we work this out was we will notify the current local IRB of any protocol deviations or adverse events. But everything flows to the CRB. It makes it very streamlined. Get ready for some very intense negotiations if you had not really done this. And some people have done it on paper, but it's not really happening because you need to make it happen. One of the things that we were able to do, I'm going to just move forward, is by doing this, we were able to take a trial that gets posted to CTSU and is activated. I can have that trial open at our site, ready to enroll the first patient within 7 days. There have been numerous trials, SWOG trials, where the trial opens on a Monday and I've enrolled the first patient before Friday. So there is a process by which this can be done. Imagine how much money would be saved if everybody ramped up quickly and we were able to accrue to these trials and finish these trials 6 months to a year in advance. So, but get ready for a fight if your IRB doesn't want to change. Assess site-specific needs for a trial. So rather than just the big regulatory picture, rather than the IRB, once a trial is opened within your institution, the regulatory is done, you need to figure out, and we do this concomitantly, where within the institution are we going to open this? So I work at LSU. LSU is a medical school that has no hospital. So I work out of 5 different community hospitals. And our NCORE is a federated network. We have sites all across the state. And it's federated, meaning each site activates independent of their own. So just because I open up a bladder trial at my site in Metairie, Louisiana, doesn't mean it's open up at all these other. Now they can pick from the portfolio, the regulatory's been done, the background's there, CIRB is done, consents are there. But my job is to make sure that once I request a trial, we open a trial, that trial is placed at one of the sites where it's going to accrue. There may be no bladder cancer specialist in Lake Charles, but there's plenty of us sitting in Metairie. So when we look at trials, and the trial I'm going to highlight today is SWOG 1806. SWOG 1806 is a trial that looks at changing really the way we've treated bladder cancer at most places in the U.S. Outside of Boston. And what we normally do for patients who have muscle-invasive bladder cancer is they're normally guided towards chemotherapy and then surgical removal of their bladder. At select institutions in the U.S. for a while, they've been doing chemoradiation therapy, and this is one of the biggest trials, or the biggest trial in combined modality therapy, chemoradiation for bladder cancer in the U.S. So in order to take this trial, which includes chemotherapy, it includes surgery, and it includes radiation oncology, sort of had to look at our assets at our specific sites, get the medical oncologists, radiation oncologists, urologic oncologists, and pathologists all together. And at our site, the only people who work for LSU are me and my partner, Dr. Gills, who are the urologists. The radiation oncologists that we work with, the medical oncologists that we work with, and the pathologists are all community-based. So the only people who are quote-unquote academic are my partner and I. So in order to get those people to the table, we sort of have to leverage the assets. We bring a lot of business to a hospital, and we say, look, this is something that's important to us, and then they also want to participate. there may be a lot of processes that aren't there, and we just have to build them along the way. So when I look at, these are our two sites that I specifically accrue patients to. So this is a hospital that's 3 blocks away from my LSU office. And up until 2019, this year, we accrued everything to LA045. In March of this year, we actually got our own site code at our clinic. It's a humble little clinic in South Louisiana. So we have 2 site codes, and these are the 2 places where we accrue patients to. That's another SWOG study, that chart I was showing you. When we look at SWOG 1806, I'm just going to go over an overview and some of the challenges that we've had to overcome and are still overcoming if anyone is going to be opening this trial. Again, like I said, this is the largest combined modality therapy trial in the U.S. Combined modality therapy is going in through the urethra and resecting a tumor within the bladder, and instead of taking that patient and giving them chemo and removal of their bladder, we actually take that patient and we give them chemotherapy and radiation. This trial also randomizes, and the randomization portion of this trial randomizes patients to that treatment with or without immunotherapy. This is highly desirable from a patient perspective. We are a high-volume referral center. My partner and I get referrals from all the way from Panhandle of Florida, sitting in New Orleans for cystectomy, and this has really changed the way we practice. We have the potential here to treat cancer and avoid the removal of the bladder. It's an opportunity for the patients to receive concomitant IV immunotherapy that otherwise is not approved in this space. When I first saw this trial, I'm a cystectomy surgeon. My practice was really built on taking out bladders and treating bladder cancer, and we did come with some reservations. There's some differences when you look cross trials at the outcomes based on invasive bladder cancer, but there's no head-to-head study. And then there are going to be some patients on this trial that are going to fail chemo and radiation therapy, and ultimately we're still going to have to operate on it. And conservatively, that number is probably about 40% of these patients. But even when presented with that, patients love this trial. They love the opportunity to not have a neobladder or not have a bag. So this is the schema, which is just sort of the baseline. Clinical T2 muscle-invasive bladder cancer randomizes to concurrent chemoradiation or chemoradiation with immunotherapy. And the endpoint is really bladder intact-free survival. So how long do you live with a bladder? It's not enough to look at the schema, especially on a trial like this where it was changing what we're used to doing. We whiteboarded the trial. So what we do with the whiteboard is we go get in a room, and I didn't take a picture of the room because it's so humble, I'm sort of embarrassed. But we get in a picture of a room with a bunch of markers, and we go through the entire trial from screening all the way to follow-up. And it's not just the nurse doing it, telling us, tell us what the problem is. It's a physician and the nurses together. A lot of times the physicians will come up with barriers, and the nurses come up with plenty of barriers. Say, I'm going to do what? A lot of the trials written by SWOG, like SWOG 1806 here, SWOG 1802, they're very pragmatically written. They allow some flexibility in what individual sites do. That's nice because it allows regional differences in care. But when we whiteboard a trial, any kind of variation in the treatment, I try to eliminate that. So wherever there's an option, so physician preference for chemo, physician preference for radiation therapy, we sit there and up front, we make the decision with our treating team, this is going to be how we do it. So if there's 5 options that need to be determined, we try to limit it down to 2 based upon clinical parameters. So one of the options for 1806 is what chemotherapy you're going to give concomitant with your radiation. You have gemcitabine, which is twice weekly, cisplatin, or a combo 5-FU mitomycin C. At our site, after we all met, we decided we were going to do gemcitabine and cisplatin. Could we give this on protocol? Sure, we could, but we try to make this simple. It makes it simple for infusion. They know the patient's either going to be getting gemcitabine or cisplatin. When it comes to radiation for this trial, there are 3 different options on how, and I'm not a radiation oncologist, but 3 different options on how to radiate the bladder. We chose to limit it to 1 option instead of 3. We didn't want the dosimetrist to be calculating a different plan on patient 1 as they are on patient 8. The option that we did come up with and we left in there is whether or not we were going to treat nodes or not, or we're going to treat lymph nodes or not. We were pragmatic about this, and we said, look, patients who we know from cystectomy series have a high incidence of occult lymph node metastases, so patients with LVI, clinical T3, or hydronephrosis, we would like to go ahead and treat those nodes. So our dosimetrists, radiation oncologists, everybody's on board. If one of these 3 factors is there, even though it's an option in the trial, we're going to treat nodes. And that's what we're doing at our site. There's an option in the trial to place fiducials. I've never placed fiducials in a bladder before. Talked to our radiation oncologists. They said this would be very helpful. So we now place fiducials whenever we do our transurethral resection of bladder tumors in preparation for this trial. So to whiteboard is really to dissect the trial. That's too nice of a room. That's not my room. I got that off of Google. You dissect the trial. You look at the pre-treatment timeline. Look at the dates, understand that, and this is for physicians, you all know this, just because you consent a patient on a Tuesday doesn't mean you have to enroll them and randomize them that same day. So your timeline doesn't necessarily start ticking. Look at the treatment timeline and the follow-up timeline with adjustments. This is something that we do. I know that there's a RAVE system where when we take a complicated trial like this, it's nice to know what your dates with the windows are. So we just simply put this into an Excel sheet, because RAVE doesn't really do this for you. You don't know when they need to come for their 56-week window. And I always sat there and watched the nurses count weeks. And it was driving me crazy. I'm like, well, let's just put in the data randomization. And so we build one of these out for each of the trials. So that way we know exactly when patients like this, because they may be planning a Disney World trip with the kids, the following year. Okay, well, this is your window. So it's not enough to look at the schema, whiteboard the trial. If there are options within a trial, it's good to allow flexibility between institutions or site, but at a particular site, I try to limit those, in my opinion, try to standardize it. For this particular trial, we've standardized and we do a radical TUR with fiducials. We do radiation therapy limited, really the only option is plus or minus nodes. And we've narrowed the chemotherapy option down to 2 options. Makes it simple for everyone else. If someone comes to a research nurse or the coordinator and says, I want to open up a trial, one thing I tell physicians is don't push for a trial and then don't accrue to the trial. Too many people sit in a room, too many physicians sit in a room, they have no input from a research nurse, and they open up all these trials, and then they put one person on it. Okay, it's good for that one person, but really, if you're going to push and open multiple trials, you need to give patients that opportunity. You need to not waste the resources of the people that you have that are working for the program. It's very important to engage all the specialties. These are MD specialties. For me, where I'm coming from, if I can't do anything without my research nurses. But research nurses are a specialty as well. MD and CRA meetings, we have one on a weekly basis. We will go through any issues that are coming up. Whiteboard sessions at the beginning, and then again as we go through the trial. The interesting thing about our site is we'll open up so early that a lot of times we can be the guinea pig for what's wrong with the protocol. So we find out, okay, this is a problem and this is a major barrier, things that we didn't even anticipate. Especially with SWOG, but even the other collaborative groups, contacting a PI, emailing a PI, and then emailing the @SWOG. I mean, we get a response typically within 6 hours. The amendment process, if you're an early accruer to a trial, you can be involved in this amendment process. Nobody likes amendments. Y'all talked about reconsenting. And you identify new barriers. One of the barriers, the biggest barrier that we found for this trial is the fact that patients who travel more than 100 miles to see us, which is about 60 to 70% of our practice, our bladder cancer practice. We previously, when these patients came in, we said, okay, we're going to get you chemo. And we have a network set up across the Gulf Coast who give the chemotherapy that we like given, Dose-Dense-MVAC. And we send them to those particular community medical oncologists, and then they come back for their surgery. So they're not spending a lot of time near us. For this trial, it changes things. It's 7 weeks of radiation, Monday through Friday. If they're getting cisplatin, it's also weekly infusion at our center. That can't be done, 200 miles away. So that was a very big issue. To date, we've had 8 accruals. 1 accrual so far has been deemed ineligible. You know, we're talking about nightmare things before, due to when this trial opens, it is triad. That's a radiation system. You have to, in order to put the first patient on trial, you consent them, you enroll and randomize. You can't start treating them, and you can't start treating them until your first patient has been sent off to triad and triad has approved the radiation plan. Thereafter, you never have to do that step 2. Well, in this protocol, we were assuming that the timeline was starting from step 1, and in the protocol it says it's actually from step 2. So we never have to do that again because we've already put the first patient on trial. We've now put 8 patients on trial out of 10, but they're going to do amendment for that to account for either step 1 or step 2 for registration. So that hopefully is forthcoming. Dosimetry plans take some time. I didn't engage the dosimetrist up front. I just said, oh, well, radiation oncologist is there. Dosimetrists are really important. So if you're going to open up this trial, engage your dosimetrist in those meetings up front. IMRT planning was a little difficult on some of the tumor locations. So by the time we enrolled our 4th patient, the radiation oncologists were already saying, we want to use tomotherapy for this. So we've got that done, but if you're going to open up at a site, get the tomotherapy unit certified up front. And the biggest barrier has been travel and intensity of treatment compared to getting chemotherapy and then showing up for surgery. We had 6 patients that could not enroll due to this constraint early on. The patients that were upset, one of them crying in my office, I want to go on the trial, but I can't afford to travel all the way from Alabama here for 7 weeks. So we've leveraged case managers, social work, philanthropy, leveraged the hospital, and this actually prompted a SWOG initiative a pilot study. And Rick Bangs really was spearheading this, along with everyone else at SWOG. And this is going to be the first of its kind. It's a structured patient assistance program for patients who are going to go on this trial. We're going to do a 25-patient pilot. It's a collaboration between Genentech, SWOG, and HOPE. We're going to assess the financial cost of therapy and travel and assess and sort of develop a process for patient assistance. So within the trial, within CTSU, this will be its own sort of side clinical trial. And it's a great initiative, and SWOG grabbed onto this, and I appreciate them supporting this. LSU is going to be the site that's going to pilot this 25-patient pilot. So some nomenclature, I'll give you some South Louisiana faux pas. So use the term, how do we get this done, rather than this is not how we do it, or we can't, or can we do this? It's never wrong to say, why do we do it this way? I try to eliminate the term, can we do this? That's not how we do it. It's in a policy, and we can't do this. As always, patient safety is paramount. It's the number 1 thing anytime you make a decision. I think the number 2 thing is patient convenience, okay? And then number 3 is the operational, clinic workflows, hospital workflows. And at the very bottom of my list is the bureaucratic policies and the institutional fiefdoms. I just always ask why. Why are we doing it this way? And you should too. This is our team. So Eileen Medeiros is our program coordinator. She got NCORE Program Coordinator Administrator of the Year this year. And then these are our other 3 clinical research nurses, Megan, Holly, and Michelle. This is the duct tape or the glue that holds it all together. Here's myself. This is my partner, Dr. Gills, who was a number 3 in treatment trial accruals in 2019. These are our 2 community radiation oncologists and our community medical oncologists who we work with. And that's our team. Thank you all very much for listening.